topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Why Johnny Hates Sports is a best-selling book about kids in sports. It chronicles why, at a very early age, children are thrust into organized sports long before they have the necessary skills to feel successful. Fathers and mothers are asked to be their coach without having any training on how to coach. And the leagues in which kids play are governed by volunteers whose main focus becomes scoreboards, championships, and all-star games. Statistics show that close to 70% of kids will have quit by the age of 13. Most said it ceased to be fun. And that's why Johnny Hates Sports.
Hey, good morning, Lorenzo, and thanks a lot for being here for Why Johnny Hates Sports. Lorenzo's from Cabot, Arkansas, and Lorenzo, you got to tell me, first of all, where is Cabot, Arkansas? And second, tell the audience what your job is there with the rec department.
So Cabot, Arkansas is probably about 15, 20 minutes from Little Rock, northeast of Little Rock. We're still considered Central Arkansas. I work with the Cabot Parks and Recreation Department out of the city of Cabot, and I'm the recreation manager here since 2016. Well, first, my position was called program director. But then since we have expanded and grown a lot, not just with our sports, but with our other buildings and stuff like that, I've been here since 2016 as the program director. And then recently, within this last year, they changed my title to recreation manager. And I oversee all the youth and adult sports.
Yeah, the number one thing that people keep asking me about this show, they say, it's Why Johnny Hates Sports, and I try to explain, as you saw in the book intro in the beginning, about why Johnny Hates Sports. And when I was growing up, when I was a rec director in Wilmington, Delaware, that's when I made the decision to do something about it, because I would see all kinds of examples of parents losing perspective and acting like idiots out there with their child screaming and yelling when they're making the littlest of mistakes. And then you see the coaches out there who, they came out as dads who just were signed up. I didn't say they signed up. They were signed up to be a coach because they said, you can't have your kid in a program unless you come out to coach. And so they turned into a different character there when they put up scoreboards and standings, all-star teams and whatever. And then all hell broke loose when it got to the end of the year when there are standings and championships. So I know you, along with all the other recreation directors around the country that we've had on the show, have had experiences. So why don't you tell me what happens in Cabot and from time to time things that you see, that happens in your program with parents and coaches?
So within Cabot here, I think every town, city is different. So, I've seen some crazy things happen with the 11 years that I've been here. Parents arguing back and forth, coaches arguing back and forth. That's just the worst thing to see in front of kids. Yes, parents have signed up their kids for a certain sport, but they really didn't sign them up to play that sport. They really signed them up for different aspects of that sport or just rec sports in general. Just the physical activity, teamwork, discipline in regards to communication like that. So we do have steps in regards to when parents or coaches, spectators, if they get out of line. We tried a few things. It didn't work, but we have a sports oversight advisory committee where if there is an issue arise where a parent coach gets ejected, it can possibly go to them where they give them more of a penalty. This was created about 2 years ago here in our town, just because we didn't, myself, the recreation manager, or our 3 recreational programmers that are underneath me, we wouldn't be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. The advisory committee is made up of individuals that coach in our league or have coached in our league, and some just outside people that are, recommended in regards to that. So,
yeah, I hear you. But what I don't hear you saying, and what I'd like to hear is, and not me, but the audience would like to hear, I mean, give me some specific stories. You've had stories, you had to have it, or you wouldn't have a council, you wouldn't have people, oversight committee. You've had examples of people really acting like idiots. So give me a few.
Well, I do have a few stories in regards to that. One story, I think it was my first year here, where we had a coach from another team coming into the gym and started arguing, not even in a game that they were playing against each other. That was very crazy because I was at a different facility at that time, and then I had to rush over to calm that down. Another issue was, unfortunately, walking out an individual that was in uniform that was enlisted into the Army, Air Force, whatever it was. I can't remember the exact one that they were in, but that was probably my second year. My third year here, we did have an individual within our basketball program chest bump one of our referees, and bowed up, ready to throw down in front of first and second graders. Unfortunately, at that time, the cops were called to help escort that individual out of that facility at that time. And then, we have issues where, I had to address an issue in regards to parents yelling at each other. I had to get in the middle of them because it's really happening in our younger age divisions, from our 5U to 8U, sometimes in 10U, not too much, but they're so worried about, like within your book is, they're so worried about the scoreboard in regards to that. So it's very crazy of the incidents that we have had to deal with within Cabot. And sometimes it's, it's not every year, but it's unfortunately there's sometimes individuals that repeat in regards to arguing with each other, acting out against officials, it depends on the sport for that. So, yeah.
So let's get back to the first story. You said that somebody came in and they weren't even part of the program and it started causing a problem. What was the issue there? I mean, you don't just walk into a gym or a field and what was that? That's strange.
Yeah. So he was within our program. He was a coach from a different team in our first and second grade basketball league. Come to find out, it was something that was outside. They knew each other for a while. And
wait a minute, did you say the first and second grade team?
Yes.
We're talking about 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It is crazy when you say it was first and second graders, the age 6, 7, 8-year-olds. But yeah, I guess it just deemed from past incidents, it was the first game of a season. I was like, oh, great. This is how we're going to start our basketball season in regards to that. So I really didn't get too much into detail in regards to it, but I guess they had a previous experience, like growing up when they were younger, and then through the high school days and in regards to that. And then, just knowing each other within our town, things being said about each other. And we didn't think anything, we didn't know all this was going on in the past, but yeah, it just, we didn't really know what it was about in regards to the incident. But the worst part about it, like I said, it was in front of first and second graders.
Did you ever find out why? I mean, you said it something from the past or whatever with the guy that was doing it was just out of poor behavior or what?
Well, it started with when he walked in the gym, he walked over to where the coaches and the teams were at. And he was like, well, first he said, why are you staring at me? and the coach was like, I wasn't staring at you. The game is going on. And the way you enter in the gym, you can look straight through the court and looking at the front entrance of the part of our community center at that time, in regards to that, because I'm not looking at you. I wasn't doing anything. I was looking at my players. The game was going on. So how could you accuse me of that? I guess it comes from Deming, from, I guess this coach was bullying this coach when they were in school and was bad talking them still to this day. Not to this day, but at that time, those coaches are no longer in our league. Like that was my first year here. So that was in January of 2014, for that issue.
And you said, welcome to U Sports and Cabot, right? So when you started. But you mentioned a guy in a uniform. I didn't get what you meant by that story. What was that?
He was in the military. It was in our 15U division, in regards to, there was a play at the plate and the umpire called him out. And he was, after, getting statements and stuff, he was out, but he was just arguing, he was safe. The parent was in the stands and he was in uniform, being within the armed forces, in regards to that. So, come to find out, I guess somebody contacted his first shirt, in regards to that within the military, and within the armed forces. I don't remember what branch he was in, but I guess he did get a stripe taken away in regards to how he was acting within a 15U game, which our 15U division consists of 13 to 15-year-olds. So,
yeah, I remember people would say, "Oh, it's not as bad as you think it is," and whatnot. And I'd say, "Yes, it is. If you were part of a program like I was, and most recreation people that I knew would echo the same thing. As a matter of fact, if they didn't, I would never have been able to create the National Alliance for Youth Sports to be able to deal with the issue, because people would say, nah, we don't have a problem." So yeah, we do have a problem because of people like you and Cabot and around the country having the same kind of problems. I remember doing a thing with HBO, and it was about the same issue. And it said, are there any leagues or anything that we could go and maybe find an example? And I thought, well, yeah. So there was just the start of a football program, and they sent into this place, hoping that maybe they could find something, because you and I know, and everybody knows, it doesn't happen every day all the time, but it happens enough to cause all the concern. But in this case, this coach, was a typical example who you would never want your kid to be involved in, as having him as a coach. He was screaming at the official on the field, telling him things like Ray Charles couldn't deal with that, and they grabbed a kid by the face mask and just shook his head around like a dog on a leash, and so I just wonder, with stories like that, what would you say is maybe the worst story that you can think of, since you've been there since 2016? What do you think is the worst story that you've heard, or as an example of this bad, ugly parenting?
On recently, actually, the worst one that I had to deal with was, this past fall season, within our football league. We had an individual follow the referees to the parking lot to pretty much their cars. Luckily, there was no physical altercation in regards to that, but I think it almost could have led to that. And this happened in our football league, in regards to ages, I think 9 to 11. Within that, calling the referees certain names, in regards to that, ready to bow up, ready to fight. But it was de-escalated quickly by our staff. I think that's probably one of the worst ones, in regards to the issue. That individual was complaining that the referees were one-sided, in regards to that. But this game was towards the end of the season for that. After we did a review and looked into the statements and stuff that we have received for that issue, it wasn't even about the referees. Some of the parents from that team where that individual spectator was on, they were just saying the things that he was saying. There was nothing one-sided. The game was called great. Of course, the team is going to say it's called great. Unfortunately, they did win. But just the statements we got in regards to that incident, I think that was probably one of the craziest ones that I have in story, where following an official to the parking lot to yell at them and berate them and call them names in regards to a youth football game.
Yeah, I always use the example of saying, okay, supposing you people had a kid that was in a spelling bee in school and their parents all showed up the same way, and one of the kids misspelled a word, and the parent in the back room jumped up and yelled, "Billy, you how can you be so stupid? How you would never see that," because in school they would get that parent out of there, and who knows what would happen. So what would happen in your case with the rec department? You get that kind of behavior, a guy going out in the parking lot, and what do you do about it?
So what we did is, we sent it to our oversight committee, advisory committee. There was a police report reported from the referees and that individual that was in the altercation in regards to that. So we sent it to our oversight committee, and our oversight committee banned that individual for 5 years in regards to attending any Cabot Parks and Rec youth sport event at our property.
Yeah, that's an example of what I think lacks in youth sport programs across the country, because you have situations where that goes on and they slap somebody's wrist, or you get a really terrible example that one of the coaches or the parents happen to be a city commissioner, and the rec department person is afraid to do any kind of punishment for that person, thinking they might lose their job. But yeah, I mean, it's just great to hear that you have an oversight committee and you can get rid of people for this poor kind of behavior. But it's so great to know that there are people like you, Lorenzo, there in Cabot, Arkansas, and around the country. And I want to applaud you for the great work that you do, and thank you again for being on the show of Why Johnny Hates Sports.
Thank you, sir. It's greatly appreciated in regards to being a guest on your show.
Well, maybe back again. If one of the things is, if you have another bad story like that on, let me know, because we'd like to hear any of those bad stories. Not that we want to hear them, but we want to let know people that this shouldn't go on. We should be continuing to work towards preventing any kind of abuse, of psychological, emotional, or physical abuse of kids in sports. So again, thanks again, Lorenzo, for being on.
Thank you very much. And hopefully I don't have any crazy stories, but I know we will, unfortunately, in regards to within our sport leagues.
Well, good. Thanks again.
All right.
In this best-selling book, a child, while failing to live up to his father's expectations, is shamed and humiliated beyond belief. He vows to never allow his own son to face the same.
Each week, people have been saying, "Hey, you have a thing about the book of Billy Jones's father," and people said, "Well, I don't have time to read it," or whatever. So we decided to take a little chapter at a time, and so that's what we're doing each week. And here we go with the second chapter. But in the first chapter, what happened is the family lived in Texas, and they had a lot of problems there, and so Sarah and her father, Jeff Tobin, and mother and her sister moved to North Carolina. And after they got there, Then she got a job in the rec department, and she began to run into Billy Jones's father. And that story begins with the second chapter. Here we go.
I'll tell you one thing. My dad kicked ass, Arnold proclaimed in his usual braggadocio manner to the 5 regulars who met most afternoons at Andy's Bar and Grill. All 5 worked at the Torrid Hills Tobacco Industry, THTI, owned by Scotty Jones, Arnold's dad. It only took a couple of beers before it became customary to listen to Arnold pontificate on the athletic heroics of his father. But the group had little choice but to appease Arnold as he rambled on about one episode after another. He was, after all, the general manager of his dad, Scotty's THTI business. It was strange hearing Arnold talk about his father's athletic skills. After all, Arnold himself was a failure at every sport he tried, and the group knew it. When Arnold wasn't looking, Al Simpson would roll his eyes in mockery as Arnold continued. The others had the faces of Sunday parishioners listening to the good reverend asking for more money from the congregation. Arnold's dad had tried desperately to make Arnold another athlete to shine in the Jones family athletic tree. But poor Arnold seemingly tripped over his 2 left feet like a drunken sailor walking the ship's deck in the middle of a tropical storm. But Arnold wouldn't give up. "Why don't you try music like your sister, Arnold?" his grandfather would plead. "My dad was the greatest, and I will be just as famous. Just watch." Arnold would announce at 10 years old. When he played baseball, he would overrun an outfield fly ball so badly that the other team's player on second base would have no trouble making it to home plate. Most of his coaches wouldn't think of cutting Arnold from the team. By cutting him, they knew they would suffer Scotty's irrational reaction. They yearned for Arnold to have some of his father's talent, but it wasn't meant to be. Not all coaches bowed like scared sheep to Scotty's pressure. Arnold's Little League baseball coach, Lionel Massey, had had enough of Scotty's overbearing influence. It all came crashing down during Arnold's first year in Little League. "What's the matter with you, Lionel?" Scotty would yell as he fidgeted in his seat, watching them practice. "Whoever let you coach this team, put my boy in Lionel," he would scream, "or you won't be coaching this team again. I know the head of this league, and he'll have your ass out of here in a heartbeat." Arnold would lift his shoulders, as if trying to hide his head under his shirt in embarrassment. The other players stared at him like he was a wounded puppy wanting to hide under a fence. Lionel dropped him from the team when Arnold struck out 4 times in the season's first game. Arnold cried as he walked the 5 blocks to his home. Being cut by Coach Lionel was the least of his problems. He knew telling his father would mean a certain beating. But he was in for a surprise. Walking in the door, trembling with fear, he said, "Dad, Coach Lionel cut me from the team." Scotty had a ferocious temper, brought on by bipolar disorder, some suggested, the result of serving in Vietnam. It took very little to set him off. The crying words out of Arnold's mouth did just that. Like a stone thrown into a wasp nest, Scotty stormed out of the house into his car and rushed to the ball field, knocking over almost every trash can lining the streets. Slamming on the brakes, he jumped from the car and headed towards the field. Lionel stood with mouth gaping as he trembled at the sight of what looked to be a ferocious leopard about to attack him. "You fucking bastard! That's my son, you cut!" With that, he hauled off and landed his right fist on Lionel's jaw, sending him floating to the ground like a sheet falling off a clothesline in a windstorm. The townsfolk ignored Lionel's plea to have Scotty arrested. He was Scotty Jones, and no one wanted to intervene. Back home, running his hands through his hair and pacing back and forth across the floor, a disgruntled Scotty suddenly blurted out to his wife Martha, Why don't we enroll him in one of those sports camps? They ought to bring out his talent somewhere in that body." "Great idea," Martha said in delight. They tried, but after 2 weeks, Harry Whitfield, the camp director, threw his hands up in frustration. Arnold did not have what it took to be any kind of athlete. He told the Joneses that they were wasting their money trying to make a silk purse from a sow's ear. In his mind, Arnold became a failure to the parents he so wanted to please. He sat, depressed in his room night after night. His failed little league days were over. When Arnold was about 14 years old, like a tsunami wave about to wreak havoc, the old torment was to reappear. Scotty announced, "Arnold, your mom and I have been talking about your going to high school and how you might be one of those, what psychologists call, late matures. We figure that might be why you never did well playing Little League. You think that might be why you stunk out there on the field." 7. "Gosh, I don't know, Dad, but are you saying you want me to go out for high school sports?" "What the hell do you think I was talking about?" Scotty yelled back. "Of course, if you want to sign up for a sewing class, we could arrange for you to do that," he said with a glare. Arnold pinched his lips tightly to keep them from trembling. A few months later, when it came time for Arnold to go to high school, he had no choice but to sign up for sports. To avoid the wrath of Scotty, he signed up every season for a sports team. And, of course, the coaches in high school also feared the rage of Scotty if they didn't include Arnold on the team. His fellow players knew what was happening, and, behind the coach's back, became unmerciful to Arnold. Once, they hid all his clothes in the locker room trash can. Another time, they filled his locker with shaving cream. But worst of all was the verbal hazing he faced as a loser whenever he set foot on the court or field. It all began during basketball season. At one game, Coach Tommy Alexander, feeling Scotty's glare like a 6-inch knife entering his back, put Arnold in during the last few minutes. Arnold cost the team the game. In the last 10 seconds, he, by mistake, threw the ball to an opposing team player who rushed down the court to score the winning shot. Scotty came running to the court, screaming at the top of his voice, "You bum! You can never do anything right!" Scotty and Martha never gave up hope. Well, at least Scotty didn't. He often attended Arnold's games, thinking that a day would come when he would do something that wasn't a complete disaster. This day wasn't that day. Arnold dropped an easy pass in the end zone of the football game that would have given his team the win. Arnold was devastated and feared the tongue-lashing he would get as he rode home in the back seat. As Scotty and Martha sat up front, Arnold's mother, a red-faced, fiery woman, blasted Arnold as never before. He sat, feeling dejected and rejected. "Do you realize how much you embarrassed us out there?" Arnold's mother yelled, demeaning and hateful words. "I've seen a lot of football games where I was proudly watching your father play, but never have I seen anyone as awful as you out there looking like a fool. How do you think it makes us look in front of all those people? Your daddy was a hero around here, and now you go about destroying his legacy. You are a complete failure in our eyes," she yelled with a voice screaming with hate and anger. 2. When they arrived home, Arnold went straight to his room, locked the door, and cried for an hour. Thus was the young life of Arnold Jones.
Well, there you have it for our second episode of Billy Jones's father. You can tell Arnold wasn't doing too well playing sports. But I'm happy to have us introduce the next new phase of our program. And here we go with it with my friend Ross Smith.
Extra Innings, with Fred and Ross.
Morning, Ross. We got it again this week.
Good morning, Fred. How we doing?
Good. I'm sorry I had a long delay there getting you on. I didn't think it would be this long, but hey, you made it, and here we go.
We're here, baby. Let's get it.
Yeah, that's what. And we got all a new audience each week and whatnot. Give them a 15-second story about your background.
My background, grew up in sports altogether. Mom was a basketball player. Dad was a baseball guy. Was a pro scout for 30 years. I grew up on a pretty high level of organized sports, specifically baseball. Went to Auburn out of high school. Played a few years there. Got drafted. Played for the St. Louis Cardinals for 2.5 years, and opened up a baseball business after pro baseball. So kind of stayed in the sport world and tried to give back to the community and to the sport that gave me so much. So I switched from baseball to golf and just replaced one white ball with another, and here we are.
Yeah, and that's like a lot of baseball players do. Now, we've switched gears from Why Johnny Hates Sports, and this is with a little discussion between you and me. So we're going to pick a different topic each week to talk about. So first one we wanted to talk about is the Pete Rose deal. Now, everybody knows, Ross, about the Pete Rose and the fact that he now, he got loose. What do you think about that story?
I mean, I think obviously rest in peace to Pete. I think that the timing of it is probably the most, I guess, the most controversial part to me. Just because getting off of the leash.
Why do you say the timing?
Because if he were still alive, I don't know if he would have been given the opportunity to be eligible for the Hall of Fame. I think that, just my personal opinion, I think that they would have stuck to their guns, so to speak, and they wouldn't have let the guy get voted in.
Do you think he should be in the Hall of Fame?
My opinion, without a doubt, yes.
How about that? I thought maybe you were going to say that no, because a lot of people, obviously say they don't think that he should be in the Hall of Fame, but I think he should be in the Hall of Fame because you got to separate the two. I mean, to talk about his gambling, his gambling, but turn around and look at today, everybody can gamble. I mean,
exactly. I mean, are we talking about how the man is off of the field, or are we talking about the statistics that he put up during his, career? To me, I look at the statistics and they are undeniable. They belong in the Hall of Fame. So that person belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I don't understand why, Giamatti, who was the commissioner at the time, he was so adamant about the whole deal that, okay, he cheated. And of course, Pete said he never bet on his own team. I don't know whether we believe that or not, but that's what he said. But why do you think Giamatti just was so against letting him get in the Hall of Fame?
I don't know. It could be a couple of reasons. One that comes to the top of my mind is, you're worried about your own self-image. You don't want to be the guy known that has an overwhelming majority of people that say he shouldn't be in, and then you chose to let him in. So I don't know if it was just like an self-ego thing. That's just a reach. I think that maybe it goes deeper. I mean, we'll never know, but maybe he lost money on Pete Rose not going in his favor with his personal betting or whatever. We'll just it's very interesting and it's sad, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it at that time, I mean, this was what, 25 years ago at least, that when he was coaching or being a manager of the Reds, that he's there betting on other games and whatnot. And then, of course, at that time is unheard of thinking of it. But like I say, I mean, you go on FanDuel and the Hard Rock here in Florida, you can make bets on anything. And and it's hard for me to believe that any of the baseball players today, are not doing the same thing. They're betting out there.
Yeah, I mean,
What do you think?
I think it's similar to like when you have any big mega star, so to speak, in any professional sport, and they don't do things exactly by the book. I think that it gets blown up more than, I don't want to say out of proportion, but more than maybe normal or more than it should, because we see these guys as we put them on such a high pedestal, he or she, and when they're not perfect, we can't fathom that they would do such things. But to me, I mean, it's a little hindsight's 2020, where today's world you can bet left and right on the color of Gatorade that comes out when they dump it on the winning coach. I mean, you can bet on anything, like you said. And so generationally different back then, it was frowned upon. But I mean, it's public knowledge. You can Google and look up that he bet on his own team amongst others. But when he bet on his own team, he bet on them to win and win only. So I mean, he wasn't like he was going out and blowing games. He was betting on his team to win. So I don't think that he would do anything detrimental on the field that would cause them to lose on purpose. So I mean, I just a little conflicted when they say, they put such like a dark cloud over it.
Yeah, I mean, you and I agree with the whole bit of whether he should be reinstated and whatnot. But I mean, you look at the batting average. You're a baseball player or whatnot, but to think that the number of hits and the way that he played, I don't know that they'll ever see another player like him, especially with the number of hits that he got. Do you?
And no, not at all. And I don't, with the whole package included, Charlie Hustle and all that, like the way he played the game, outside of being the hit king, which is unbelievable. But the way he played the game, and how much heart and passion that he put into it, how much hustle. I mean, that whole package. I think that the guy was just a complete ball player. He had some issues or whatever you want to call it off the field, but with all due respect, what he did on the field in between the white lines was second to none.
Yeah, I'm going to switch gears here with you, Ross. You're one of the people, one of the few that went through the system of playing baseball as a little kid and come on all the way up to signing, with the Cardinals and going out and with the minor league. But I want to ask you a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
You get on a team like it was Johnson City. You were with one of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Johnson City was the first place that the Cardinals sent me to after I got drafted. They
Yeah.
send you, and it's not necessarily an automatic. You don't really know where you're going to go. It's all according to kind of your age. They look at your numbers of what you did at your respective age, and kind of because they don't want to advance you too far too soon and kind of throw you into the fire, so to speak. So Johnson City was the first place where me, alongside a lot of other collegiate guys that got drafted, were sent. So I went to Johnson City first. I went to Batavia, New York after that. I went to Davenport, Iowa, Quad Cities, and then ended up in Palm Beach here in Florida.
And then what happened?
When you can basically triple my overall batting average to get close to what Pete Rose did for a career, they're not going to keep you around.
I guess.
Yeah.
I picture. I think I told you I was an agent for a major league player. Got to the major leagues, but I often wonder with minor league players the stories of, you got to get on a bus and go from Davenport to wherever to play your next game. A lot of stuff goes on in between the games and whatnot.
Yeah.
You want to tell me about any interesting issue that might have gone on?
Yeah, I mean, so especially playing, like you said, Davenport, that's a Midwest league. Up in the Midwest, it's pretty spacious. So, I mean, we would have on average, I think our shortest was like 4.5 hours, with our biggest one being 9 or 10 hour bus ride right after games. Because we play series in baseball. So you would play a series against whatever team, and then you would travel through the night to get ready for the next series. And those bus rides, I mean, the bus ride literally by itself can be entertaining with, your teammates from all over the world that are playing the same sport that you played.
You say it can be entertaining. What do you mean entertaining with your teammates and whatnot? Tell me a little
Um,
more. And I
you
see
know, you're in
this.
a tight space, and some of those guys, they listen to different music, they talk at a different tone. Like, I mean, they're from all over the world, so you got all different types of people and cultures all in one small space, and you have, you know, you learn to get along because they're all chasing the same dream of trying to get to the big leagues. So, I mean, the journey itself of going through pro ball, ultimately not making it, but just the journey of meeting people that I call my friends now, but you know, my teammates at the time, and going through the quote unquote trenches with them. You know, I wouldn't trade it for anything because it's, you know, it's lasting lifelong friendships.
Anybody in that team ever make it all the way to the big leagues?
Yeah. My draft class was a pretty successful one. I mean, I slept on an air mattress with another man for 6 months, who ended up later in life winning the World Series with the Washington Nationals. So I mean, just little examples like that of stories that I wouldn't trade for anything as I get older.
Yeah, I guess. Speaking of stories, you had said to me, you know, about the book that I wrote about people I've met, of talking about any. You got any story you want me to talk about?
Off top, the Muhammad Ali really gets me going. The one where you're just chilling on the airplane and he's walking up and down the aisles or whatever. I just couldn't fathom.
Yeah.
I couldn't fathom that. I think that's really,
Well,
really
that's
cool.
one of the 30 stories that maybe we could talk about from each week and whatnot. Yeah,
Yeah.
I used to love watching Muhammad Ali. I mean, I just it's so unfortunate the people that were into boxing. I was into boxing because my grandfather was he couldn't get him away from TV. We'd watch on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights, and then after a while, it became a time when Muhammad Ali was coming up. But a lot of people don't realize that so many people hated him. I mean,
Right.
he would get people and say, you know, how pretty I am, and people didn't like to hear that. But then he would taunt the boxers he would be boxing against, and you know, and calling them names,
Mm-hmm.
making them so mad. But yeah, I mean, so he was kind of somebody I really thought was just a unique individual. And of course, when he refused to go into the war in Vietnam, that's what people really got
Yeah.
upset with him,
Yeah.
and then he came out. But then he got back into it, and at that time I was traveling and doing a lot of traveling between teams, and I ended up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, on my way to Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I've at that time he was training somewhere around Allentown, and he has to get going to Chicago. And I'm at the airport, and I look over and see all these people around. You know, he would have them crowded around talking to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets on the plane. Now I'm on the plane. I'm in the back of the plane, and I come to find out that he hated to fly, and he always said he wanted to sit in the front of the plane because he'd be the first one out when it crashed. But we're halfway through the flight, and the flight attendant's coming down, getting ready to serve,
Mm-hmm.
and he gets up and starts walking because he was nervous being on the plane. And so he decides to walk, and he's walking down the aisle. People got their pens out for him to sign, and he going by and saying, "Oh, aren't I beautiful?" You know, and so he's walking. All of a sudden, and turn around, and the cart girl is there at the front, and she's coming towards the back, towards him. So he's got to keep coming to the back. Now I'm
Uh-huh.
sitting in the back, and I'm sitting by the window, and the guy's sitting on the aisle, and then there's a guy in the middle of us. I swear he must have weighed 340 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And he's budged into his seat. And we get back there. Now the cart girl's there. Muhammad can't go anywhere. So he's
He's
got to
stuck.
stand away. He can't
Yeah.
get back around them or anything. So he decides just to stay there rather than, and he starts talking to us. And he's telling us all these different stories of things, one after another. But all of a sudden, he looks down, and the guy in the middle, the 340-pounder, he turns and looks at him and he said, "Man, I got to tell you something. You got to get away from that damn refrigerator at midnight."
Golly. That's what I mean. Like his charisma, his personality, I would love to just even been in the room where that man was. To be that good at whatever it is that you do respectfully, professionally, and be able to just like talk like that. I can't. I would want to be in the same room and just soak it all in.
Now, how old were you when you first saw Muhammad Ali on TV or wherever? And
Oh, not until, I mean, growing up, he was a little bit before my time,
yeah, sure.
unfortunately. But and I grew up in a household that was, you know, I think along with several other families in the country, not too, not huge fans of him, but in my
You're
mind,
putting it mildly. You're putting it
yeah,
mildly.
yeah. And in my mind, I just saw greatness. I saw a guy that he talked a lot of smack, but he backed it up. And I think that's really one of the greatest things in sports is not just being good at your sport, but how you handle yourself and knowing that you're good at it, and not necessarily intentionally putting others down, but having a sense of humor and not being so robotic, machine like. I think it magnified him in my mind to you know want to see him more.
Yeah.
The other one was Cal Ripken. I was going to ask you about Cal Ripken too.
Well,
Obviously that was
you
more
know
in my
what?
sport, but those two
Yeah.
stuck
Well,
out in my head.
yeah. How about maybe next week we talk about the Cal Ripken story, because Cal Ripken
I think
Jr.
that's a
story.
great. I think it's a great teaser for next week. We get ready for Cal Ripken next week.
Yeah, we'll do it next week. But thanks for being on again, as always, with our extra innings with Fred and Ross. We'll get
You
into
got
a
it.
little deeper, a little uglier stuff in the next few weeks.
You got it. You got it.
All right,
Looking
Ross.
forward to it.
Hey, have a good weekend, man.
Bye, guys.
Well, there you go. That's our show for this week. We changed it and added a little bit more to it with, Lorenzo from Cabot, Arkansas. Wow, Cabot, Arkansas. Had never heard of that before. And then a little bit of Billy Jones's father book to hear, and then of course our extra innings with me and Ross. And yeah, next week we'll talk about the story with me meeting Cal Ripken Jr. And it was more than just meeting it. It was a very interesting story for me, but we'll talk about it but then. So thanks for tuning into Why Johnny Hates Sports this week, and you all have a great weekend.
This program is sponsored by Sir Durf Publishing in the interest for better sports for kids, better kids for life.